This is HOA Neighbor Wars, and the timeline is absurd. I am calling the vendor right now. That was what Deborah yelled at me from my front walkway, her phone already up to her ear like she was about to summon an army. I was standing on my porch in Erie, Pennsylvania, holding a bright orange violation door hanger that had appeared 20 minutes earlier, and she was telling me that if I filed a complaint, she would file 3 complaints back. My name is on a cable installer contract, which means I deal with easements and property lines every single day, and I know what selective enforcement looks like. This was it. The Sequoia Terrace Reserve Association had a history, and Deborah Phillips was at the center of every ugly chapter. She was the rules enforcement chair, which in this neighborhood meant she could invent extra administrative fees that were not in the covenants and then act like they had been there all along. I had seen her do it to other people. 2 years ago, a neighbor named Greg got hit with a towing notice for parking his work van on his own driveway overnight. The covenant said no commercial vehicles visible from the street, but Greg's van was behind a fence. Deborah said the fence did not count because it was chain link, not solid, and she had him towed anyway. He paid the fees, moved, and never came back. The case was never resolved. No one asked questions. No one checked the paperwork. It just disappeared into the HOA file cabinet like it never happened. Now it was happening to me. The violation notice said my car was parked in a guest spot overnight, which was a restricted zone according to the rules. The problem was, I had not parked in a guest spot. I had parked in my assigned spot, the same spot I had been using for 2 years, and I had photos to prove it. But when I tried to log into the HOA portal to upload my evidence, the system locked me out. The error message said my account was under review. I called the management company. They said Deborah had flagged my account for suspicious activity and they could not override it without board approval. The board packet was being finalized this afternoon, and I had to get my evidence included before it was sealed. Deborah was still on her phone, pacing on my walkway. She was wearing a pink blazer with the hood up even though it was a hot day with sweat and tempers rising fast, and she had a roll of caution tape hanging from her belt like she was about to cordon off my entire property. I stayed on my porch, my reflective armband catching the sunlight every time I moved my arm. I work early shifts, which means I am home by 3, and I had just enough time to deal with this before the packet deadline. I need to see the photos, I said. Deborah stopped pacing and looked up at me. You do not get an opinion, you get a fine schedule. That was her catchphrase. She said it to everyone. It did not matter if you had proof, if you had followed the rules, if you had receipts and timestamps and witnesses. She had paperwork and vibes, and in Sequoia Terrace, that was enough. I stared at the orange door hanger in my hand. It had a date and time printed on it, but no signature. No witness name. No photo attached. Just a checkbox next to the violation code and a handwritten note that said "Final Warning." I had never received a first warning. I had never received any warning. This was the first time I had seen this hanger, and it had appeared right after I pushed back on a separate issue last week about the gate access logs. The gate logs were part of the cold case. 2 years ago, when Greg got towed, I had asked to see the access logs to confirm whether his van had actually been visible from the street at the time of the violation. Deborah said the logs were not available because the gate vendor had changed, and the old records were lost. I let it go at the time because I was not personally involved, and I did not want to make waves. But last week, I ran into the gate technician in the parking lot. His name was Marcus, and he was working on the keypad at the main entrance. He had a tool bag unzipped with tools visible, and he was friendly. I asked him if the old logs were really gone. He laughed. Gone? No. We keep logs for 7 years. It is a compliance thing. If your HOA says they are gone, they are lying, or they never asked for them. That was when I knew. Deborah had never requested the logs. She had let Greg get towed without checking, and when I asked questions, she buried it. Now she was doing the same thing to me. I held up the door hanger. This says final warning, but I never got a first warning. Where is the documentation? Deborah lowered her phone. I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes. There it was. The boomerang line. She said it like it was a punchline, like she was daring me to challenge her. I made a mental note. That line was going to come back to haunt her, and I was going to make sure of it. I need to upload my evidence before the packet is finalized, I said. Why is my portal account locked? Deborah smiled. It is under review. You will have access once the investigation is complete. What investigation? She did not answer. She just turned and walked back toward the clubhouse, her caution tape swinging from her belt. I watched her go, and I felt the pressure building. The board packet was being finalized in 3 hours. If my evidence was not in the packet, I would not be able to defend myself at the hearing. Deborah knew that. She was running out the clock. I went inside and opened my laptop. I had screenshots of the HOA group chat from 2 years ago, right around the time Greg got towed. The chat was supposed to be for community updates, but it had turned into a coordination tool for targeted enforcement waves. Deborah and 2 other board members had a side thread where they talked about which properties to flag and how to stack violations so residents would give up and move. I had saved the screenshots because I thought they might be useful someday. Today was that day. I also had my own documentation. I had been keeping a time-stamped timeline packet for the past 2 weeks, ever since the gate log conversation. Every time Deborah changed a requirement, every time the portal went down, every time a notice appeared without warning, I documented it. The timeline was tight. It showed that every escalation happened within hours of me asking questions. It was not proof of malice by itself, but it was proof of a pattern, and patterns were enough to get an investigation started. The problem was, I could not upload anything. The portal was still locked. I tried calling the management company again. This time, I got a different person on the line. She sounded tired. I am sorry, she said. The account flag is permanent until the board votes to remove it. You will need to attend the hearing and request reinstatement in person. When is the hearing? Next week. Next week. The packet was being finalized today. If I could not get my evidence in the packet, the board would vote without seeing it. Deborah would control the narrative. I would lose by default. I hung up and sat back in my chair. I needed a different plan. The portal was locked, but the packet was not sealed yet. If I could get my evidence to the management company directly, they might include it. I pulled up the management company address and started gathering my files. The screenshots, the timeline, the photos of my car in the assigned spot, the doorbell footage from the night of the alleged violation. I burned it all to a flash drive and printed a cover letter. Then, I grabbed my keys. I was about to walk out the door when my phone buzzed. It was an email from an attorney. The subject line said Notice of Intent to Pursue Collection. I opened it. The email was full of bluff language meant to scare me into paying instantly. It said I owed the HOA $600 in fines and administrative fees, and if I did not pay within 48 hours, they would place a lien on my property. The email was dated today, but the violations it referenced went back 2 weeks. None of them had been sent to me before. This was the second escalation step. Deborah was stacking pressure. I forwarded the email to myself and added it to the flash drive. Then I got in my car and drove to the management company office. The office was 20 minutes away, in a strip mall next to a tire shop. I parked and walked in. The receptionist looked up from her desk. She was young, maybe early 20s, and she looked like she had already dealt with 3 angry homeowners today. "I need to submit evidence for a hearing," I said. "My portal account is locked, and the packet is being finalized today." She frowned. "What is your association?" "Sequoia Terrace Reserve." Her expression changed. She knew the name. "Oh. Okay. Let me get the property manager." She disappeared into a back office. I stood at the counter, holding my flash drive and cover letter. A minute later, a man came out. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and a tired smile. He introduced himself as Dan. "I hear you are with Sequoia Terrace," he said. "What can I do for you?" I explained the situation. The locked portal, the violation notice with no prior warning, the attorney email, the timeline. I handed him the flash drive and the cover letter. He looked at the cover letter, then looked at me. "This is Deborah Phillips, right?" I nodded. He sighed. "Yeah. She has been doing this for a while. We have had complaints before, but the board backs her every time. If you want this in the packet, I can add it, but I cannot guarantee they will read it." "I just need it on the record," I said. He nodded. "Give me the drive. I will make sure it is included." I handed it over. He took it to the back office, and I heard a printer start up. A few minutes later, he came back and handed me a receipt. It said the evidence had been received and would be included in the board packet pending review. It was not a guarantee, but it was something. I walked back to my car and sat in the driver's seat. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a neighbor named Linda. She lived 3 houses down from me, and we had talked a few times at the mailbox cluster. The text said, "I heard what Deborah is doing to you. She did the same thing to Greg 2 years ago. I have old emails if you need them." I called her immediately. Linda picked up on the second ring. "I have been waiting for someone to push back," she said. "Greg gave up because he could not afford a lawyer. But you work with property lines, right? You know how to read covenants." "I do," I said. She sent me 3 emails. They were from the week before Greg got towed. One was from Deborah to the board, suggesting they increase enforcement in the north section of the neighborhood. Another was from a board member asking if they needed to notify residents before towing. The third was Deborah's response. "No advance notice required if the violation is flagged as urgent." That email was gold. It proved Deborah had a policy of towing without warning, and it contradicted the covenant, which required at least 72 hours notice for non-emergency violations. I added the emails to my evidence file and thanked Linda. Then I called Dan at the management company and asked him to add the new emails to the packet. He said he would. By the time I got home, it was almost 5. The packet had been finalized. I did not know if my evidence was in it, but I had done everything I could. Now I had to wait for the hearing. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 6 in the evening. It was being held in the clubhouse conference room, which was the same room where the board held all their meetings. I had been to a few meetings before, but never as the subject of a hearing. I spent the weekend preparing. I printed copies of my evidence, organized it into a binder, and rehearsed what I was going to say. I knew Deborah would try to control the room. I needed to stay calm and stick to the facts. On Monday, 2 days before the hearing, I got another email from the attorney. This one was shorter. It said the HOA had decided to move forward with a lien filing unless I paid the full amount by end of business Tuesday. The timing was deliberate. The hearing was Tuesday evening. If I paid before the hearing, I would lose my leverage. If I did not pay, they would file the lien and I would have to fight it in court. It was a trap. I did not pay. Tuesday morning, I got a call from Marcus, the gate technician. He said he had been thinking about our conversation and he wanted to help. He had pulled the access logs from 2 years ago, and he found something interesting. On the night Greg got towed, the gate logs showed that Greg's van had not been parked in a guest spot. It had been parked in his assigned spot, just like he said. The logs also showed that Deborah had entered the gate code 3 times that night, which was unusual. Marcus said it looked like someone had been checking to see if the van was still there. "Can you testify to that?" I asked. He hesitated. "I can give you a written statement, but I cannot testify in person. My company has a contract with your HOA, and if I show up at a hearing, they might pull the contract." "A written statement is fine," I said. He emailed me the statement an hour later. It was detailed, professional, and damning. It showed that Deborah had been monitoring Greg's property the night of the tow, and it contradicted her claim that the logs were lost. I added the statement to my binder. At 5:30, I drove to the clubhouse. The parking lot was already full. I parked in a guest spot and walked toward the entrance. Deborah was standing outside, talking to another board member. She saw me and smiled. "You are early," she said. I did not respond. I walked past her and went inside. The conference room was set up like a courtroom. There was a long table at the front for the board, and rows of chairs for residents. About 20 people were already there, most of them neighbors I recognized. Linda was in the second row. She gave me a small nod. I sat in the front row and put my binder on my lap. The board members filed in and took their seats. Deborah sat in the middle, flanked by 2 other members. She had a stack of papers in front of her and a laminated policy sheet that she kept tapping with her finger. The board president, a man named Roger, called the meeting to order. "We are here tonight to address a violation filed against Unit 73, he said. "The resident has requested a hearing." "Deborah, can you present the case?" Deborah stood up. She cleared her throat and launched into her presentation. She said I had parked in a guest spot overnight, which violated the covenants. She said she had personally observed the violation and issued a notice. She said I had failed to respond to the notice, which triggered the escalation to a fine and an attorney letter. She said the HOA had no choice but to pursue collection. She did not mention the locked portal. She did not mention the missing first warning. She did not mention the timeline. She made it sound like I was a repeat offender who had ignored every attempt at resolution. When she finished, Roger turned to me. "Do you have a response?" I stood up and opened my binder. "I have several responses," I said. "First, I did not park in a guest spot. I parked in my assigned spot, and I have photos with timestamps to prove it. Second, I never received a first warning. The violation notice I received was marked as final warning, which means there should have been prior notices. There were not. Third, my portal account was locked the same day I tried to upload evidence, which prevented me from defending myself. Fourth, the attorney letter I received references violations that were never sent to me before. I pulled out the photos and handed them to Roger. He looked at them, then looked at Deborah. "These photos show the car in an assigned spot," he said, "not a guest spot." Deborah frowned. "The guest spot is adjacent to the assigned spot. It is possible the resident is confused about the boundary." "I am not confused," I said. "I work with property lines every day. I know where my assigned spot is." Roger nodded. Okay, what about the first warning? Deborah, do we have documentation of a first warning? Deborah flipped through her stack of papers. She pulled out a copy of the orange door hanger. This is the notice, she said. Roger looked at it. This says final warning. Where is the first warning? Deborah paused. The first warning was verbal. When? She did not answer right away. I could see her calculating. She was trying to come up with a date that would sound plausible, but she did not have one because the verbal warning never happened. I have doorbell footage, I said. It shows every person who approached my door for the past 3 weeks. If Deborah came by to give a verbal warning, it will be on the footage. The room went quiet. Deborah stared at me. Roger leaned forward. Do you have the footage with you? He asked. I do, I said. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmares and the people who fight back. I pulled out my phone and opened the Doorbell app. I connected it to the TV screen in the conference room using the HDMI cable I had brought. The screen lit up with the app interface. I scrolled back to 3 weeks ago and started playing the footage on fast forward. The room watched as delivery drivers, neighbors, and mail carriers came and went. Deborah did not appear. Not once. I stopped the fast forward at the day of the violation notice. I played the footage at normal speed. At 6:15 in the morning, Deborah walked up to my door. She was holding the orange door hanger. She looked around, hung the notice on the door handle, and walked away. The whole interaction took less than 30 seconds. She never knocked. She never rang the bell. She never announced herself. I paused the video. That is the first time Deborah came to my door, I said. There was no verbal warning. There was no first warning. This was the only warning, and it was marked as final. Roger looked at Deborah. She was not smiling anymore. Her face was red, and she was gripping the laminated policy sheet so hard her knuckles were white. Deborah, he said, is this accurate? She opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at Roger. I never came by, she said. The room exploded. Neighbors started talking over each other. Linda stood up and pointed at the screen. We just watched you walk up to his door, she said. Roger held up his hand. Everyone, please, let us stay focused. Deborah, the footage clearly shows you at the door. Why did you say you never came by? Deborah sat down. She put the laminated sheet on the table. I misspoke, she said. I meant I did not give a verbal warning. The notice was sufficient. But you marked it as final warning, Roger said. That implies there were prior warnings. The policy allows for escalation at the discretion of the enforcement chair, Deborah said. I determined the violation was urgent. Roger looked at me. Do you have anything else? I do, I said. I walked back to my seat and pulled out the second section of my binder. This is a timeline of every interaction I have had with the HOA over the past 2 weeks. It shows that every time I asked a question or requested documentation, my portal account was locked, deadlines were moved, or new violations were added. It also shows that the attorney letter I received references violations that were never sent to me before the letter. I handed the timeline to Roger. He read it, his expression getting darker with each page. He passed it to the other board members. They read it too. This is concerning, Roger said. Deborah, can you explain why the portal account was locked? It was flagged for suspicious activity, Deborah said. What activity? She did not answer. Roger waited. The room waited. Finally, Deborah said, the resident was uploading multiple files in a short period of time. It triggered an automatic review. That is not true, I said. I uploaded one file. A photo of my car in my assigned spot. The account was locked within minutes. Roger looked at the management company representative, who was sitting in the back row. Dan stood up. "We do not have an automatic review system," Dan said. "Account flags are manual. Someone from the board has to request them." Roger turned to Deborah. "Did you request the flag?" "Yes," Deborah said. "But it was necessary to prevent tampering." "Tampering with what?" "With the evidence." "The evidence that proved I was right?" Deborah did not respond. Roger closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. He looked exhausted. I pulled out the final section of my binder. "I also have emails from 2 years ago," I said. "They show that Deborah has a pattern of towing residents without proper notice. One of those residents was Greg, who lived in Unit 41. He was towed for parking his work van in his assigned spot, and Deborah claimed the gate logs were lost so no one could verify the violation. I contacted the gate vendor, and they confirmed the logs were never lost. They still have them. In fact, the logs show that Greg's van was in his assigned spot, not a guest spot. And they also show that Deborah entered the gate code multiple times the night of the tow." I handed the emails and the gate vendor statement to Roger. He read them slowly. When he finished, he looked at Deborah with an expression I can only describe as disbelief. "You told us the logs were lost," he said. "They were lost by the previous vendor," Deborah said. "The vendor says they have kept logs for 7 years," Roger said. "They say you never requested them." Deborah stood up. "This is a witch hunt," she said. "The resident is trying to discredit me because he does not want to pay his fines." "I do not owe any fines," I said. "I did not violate the covenants. You fabricated a violation, locked my portal account so I could not defend myself, and sent an attorney letter to intimidate me into paying. And you did the same thing to Greg 2 years ago. This is not about one violation. This is about a pattern of abuse." The room erupted again. Neighbors were standing up, shouting questions at Deborah. Linda was on her feet, pointing at the timeline. Roger banged his hand on the table. "Everyone sit down," he said. "We are going to take a short recess. Board members, we need to discuss this privately." The board members stood and filed out of the room. Deborah followed them, her face pale. I stayed in my seat, my binder open on my lap. Linda leaned over from the second row. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "I do not know," I said. "They might still back her." "No way," Linda said. "You have too much proof. They cannot ignore this." I wanted to believe her, but I knew how HOAs worked. Boards protected their own. Even when the evidence was overwhelming, they found ways to justify it. I sat and waited. The recess lasted 20 minutes. When the board members came back, Deborah was not with them. Roger sat down and cleared his throat. "We have reviewed the evidence," he said. "The board has determined that the violation against Unit 73 is invalid. The fine and attorney letter are rescinded. The portal account will be unlocked immediately. We are also suspending Deborah Phillips from her role as Rules Enforcement Chair pending a full audit of her enforcement actions over the past 2 years." The room erupted in applause. Linda stood up and clapped so hard her hands turned red. I sat and stared at Roger, trying to process what he had just said. Additionally, Roger continued, "The board will be reviewing the towing policy to ensure it complies with the covenants. Any future towing will require documented board approval, and residents will receive at least 72 hours notice unless the violation poses an immediate safety risk. We apologize to the resident for the confusion and inconvenience." He looked at me. "Is there anything else you would like to add?" I stood up. "Yes," I said. "I want the evidence I submitted today to be read into the minutes, so it becomes part of the official record. I also want a formal apology from Deborah Phillips for the false violation and the intimidation tactics. Roger nodded. The evidence will be included in the minutes. As for the apology, we will discuss that with Deborah and get back to you. That is not good enough, I said. She needs to apologize in person, in front of everyone, or I will file a formal complaint with the state HOA ombudsman. Roger hesitated. He looked at the other board members. They whispered for a moment, then Roger nodded. We will arrange for a written apology to be delivered within 48 hours. If you are not satisfied with the apology, you are welcome to pursue further action. I sat down. It was not perfect, but it was more than I expected. The hearing was over. The board adjourned the meeting and neighbors started filing out. Linda walked over and hugged me. You did great, she said. Greg is going to be so happy when he hears about this. I hope so, I said. As I walked out of the clubhouse, I saw Deborah standing in the parking lot next to her car. She was on her phone again, and she looked furious. I walked past her without saying anything. I got in my car and drove home. The next morning, I got an email from Roger. It said the board had completed a preliminary review of Deborah's enforcement actions and found multiple instances of improper procedure. The email included a list of affected residents, including Greg. The board was offering to refund any fines or fees that had been improperly assessed. It also said Deborah had been removed from her role permanently and was no longer allowed to issue violations or attend board meetings. I forwarded the email to Linda and Marcus. Then I called the management company and asked for a copy of the full audit report. Dan said it would take a few weeks, but he would send it as soon as it was ready. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Deborah. The letter was short, typed on plain white paper with no HOA letterhead. It said, I apologize for any confusion regarding the violation notice. I acted in the best interest of the community and followed the procedures as I understood them. I wish you well. It was not a real apology. It was a non-apology, the kind of thing you write when someone forces you to apologize but you do not actually mean it. I read it, laughed, and threw it in the trash. A week later, I got a call from a woman who introduced herself as an insurance auditor. She said the HOA's insurance company had received a complaint about improper enforcement practices and was conducting a risk assessment. She asked if I would be willing to provide a statement. I said yes. I sent her my entire evidence file, including the timeline, the emails, the gate logs, and the doorbell footage. She thanked me and said the assessment would take about a month. 3 weeks later, Roger called me. He sounded stressed. He said the insurance company had issued a warning to the HOA. The warning said that if the HOA did not implement proper oversight procedures for enforcement actions, the insurance company would increase the premiums significantly or drop the policy altogether. The board was panicking. They called an emergency meeting to discuss how to fix the problem. At the meeting, the board voted to hire an independent management company to handle all enforcement actions going forward. Deborah's replacement would not have the authority to issue violations without board approval, and all violations would be reviewed by the management company before being sent to residents. The board also voted to refund all of Deborah's improperly assessed fines, which totaled over $15,000 across 8 residents. Greg got his money back. So did the others. The board also agreed to pay my filing fees to end the fight. I had not filed anything yet, but they wanted to make sure I did not. They sent me a check for $500 to cover any costs I might have incurred. I cashed it. As for Deborah, the board issued a formal order prohibiting her from contacting me directly. If she had any issues with my property, she had to go through the management company. She was also banned from serving on the board or any committee for 5 years. The order was recorded in the minutes and sent to every resident in the neighborhood. I did not see Deborah much after that. She stopped coming to the mailbox cluster. She stopped walking around the neighborhood with her clipboard. A few months later, I heard from Linda that Deborah had put her house on the market and moved out. The cold case was closed. The towing contract was suspended. Any future tows required documented board approval on record. The HOA had been forced to confront its own dysfunction, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a place where the rules actually applied to everyone. I stared at the letter and smiled, because it proved exactly what I suspected. Deborah had been running her own enforcement empire inside the HOA, and she had gotten away with it for years because no one had pushed back hard enough. Greg had given up. The others had given up. But I did not give up, and that made all the difference. The neighborhood changed after that. Residents started asking questions at board meetings. They started requesting copies of the covenants and checking enforcement actions against the actual rules. The board became more transparent. Violations went down because people knew the rules were being applied fairly. It was not perfect, but it was better. I kept my evidence binder in my office just in case. I never needed it again, but it felt good to have it. It was proof that you could fight back, that you could win, even when the system felt rigged. A few months later, Marcus stopped by to fix the gate keypad again. He saw me in the parking lot and waved. I walked over. "I heard what happened," he said. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it." "Yeah," I said. "It got pretty intense." He grinned. "You did a good thing. A lot of people were scared to speak up. You gave them courage." "I just wanted my car back," I said. He laughed. "Well, you got a lot more than that." He finished the repair and packed up his tools. Before he left, he handed me a business card. "If you ever need gate logs again," he said, "just call me directly. I will get them to you the same day." I thanked him and put the card in my wallet. Then I went back inside and got ready for work. Life went on. The HOA sent me a welcome packet with updated rules and a new portal login. I logged in, uploaded my car registration and insurance, and everything worked fine. No errors, no lockouts, no drama. The best part was the quiet. For the first time in months, I did not wake up wondering if there was going to be a notice on my door. I did not check the mailbox with dread. I did not avoid the clubhouse. I just lived my life, and the HOA left me alone. That was all I ever wanted. One afternoon, about 6 months after the hearing, I was walking to my car when I saw a new neighbor moving into the unit across from me. She was unloading boxes from a truck, and she looked stressed. I walked over and introduced myself. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. "If you need anything, let me know." She smiled. "Thanks. I heard this place has a pretty strict HOA. Is that true?" "It used to be," I said, "but it is a lot better now. Just make sure you read the covenants and keep documentation of everything. If you ever get a violation, do not ignore it. Push back." She nodded. "Good to know." I helped her carry a few boxes inside, and then I went back to my car. As I drove out of the neighborhood, I passed the clubhouse. The parking lot was empty. The conference room lights were off. It looked peaceful. I turned onto the main road and headed home. The sun was setting, and the sky was orange and pink. It was a good day, a quiet day. The kind of day you do not take for granted when you have spent months fighting an HOA. Looking back, the whole thing felt surreal. I had gone from being locked out of the HOA portal to forcing an insurance risk warning that made the board panic. I had reopened a 2-year-old cold case, connected the clues, and caught the person who had been weaponizing the rules all along. Deborah claimed she never came by, and the doorbell video played. The HOA paid my filing fees to end the fight. Karen, or Deborah in this case, was ordered to stop contacting me directly. It was exactly the kind of ending I had hoped for, and it felt good. But the real win was not just about me. It was about everyone else who had been targeted by Deborah over the years. Greg got his money back. The other residents got refunds. The towing contract was suspended. The rules were being applied fairly. The neighborhood was healing. I thought about the moment in the hearing when I played the doorbell footage and Deborah's face went pale. I thought about Roger reading the timeline and realizing how deep the problem went. I thought about Marcus handing me his business card and telling me I had given people courage. Those moments mattered. They were proof that standing up to bullies, even HOA bullies, was worth it. The hardest part was not the confrontation. It was not the hearing, or the evidence gathering, or the sleepless nights worrying about liens and tow trucks. The hardest part was the loneliness. When you are the only person pushing back, it feels like the whole world is against you. But then someone like Linda steps forward with old emails. Someone like Marcus gives you gate logs. Someone like Dan at the management company makes sure your evidence gets in the packet. You realize you are not alone. You never were. I kept that lesson close. Anytime I saw someone getting railroaded by the HOA, I reached out. I offered to help. I shared my binder, my timeline, my doorbell footage. I became the person I wish I had when I was standing on my porch with an orange door hanger in my hand and no idea what to do next. One evening, I was sitting on my porch when a car pulled up. It was Greg. I had not seen him since he moved out 2 years ago. He got out and walked over. "I heard what you did," he said. "I just wanted to say thank you." "You do not have to thank me," I said. "You were right all along." "I know," he said. "But no one believed me. You proved it. You made them look." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. It said, "You gave me hope that the system can work if you fight hard enough. Thank you for not giving up." I read the note and felt a lump in my throat. I shook his hand, and he got back in his car and drove away. I sat on my porch for a long time after that, holding the note, thinking about everything that had happened. The sun went down. The streetlights came on. The neighborhood settled into its evening rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a dog barking. A car door closed. A sprinkler turned on. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds. The sounds of a neighborhood that was finally working the way it was supposed to. I appreciate you spending your time with me, and I will be back soon.